The following is a recording of the Q&A discussion with Dr. Kate Lister and Dr. Pilar Lopez Cantero from the third evening of Leeds Love Month 2003 on the topic of relationships. Leeds Love Month was organised by the Centre for Love, Sex and Relationships at the University of Leeds, and we hope to improve relationships by studying intimacy. You can follow the Centre on social media for news of future events and publications. The talk series was generously funded by the Society for Applied Philosophy. Who wants to ask a question?
Thank you both, Kate and Pilar. I was just wondering, this is for Pilar, what reins do we have to use blame in a breakup in this kind of counter narrative? Like, is it free game to kind of tell ourselves that, oh God, it's all on them, in the pursuit of getting out of being a really bad breakup? Is it moral, essentially, to say, oh man, it's nothing to do with me, and put it all back on them?
Right, so sometimes it will have nothing to do with you. Right? Something it will be wholly the other person. And sometimes you will have to actually walk away from a relationship when you are being treated very badly. So you're right, sometimes you will be right to blame the other person. But then now let's think about the in the middle kind of situations where there is nothing like really bad that happened that they clearly can be blamed for. I think that is precisely a master narrative that we can resist, which is this animadversion. Is that a word? Non-native speaker here. So like this kind of like animosity towards the other person just because they don't love you back, right? And this you don't need to be some kind of like monk to accept, oh, you don't love me back, I accept it and I flow. You can be angry, but you don't have to blame the other person for not loving you back. And I think that's also something that we can start engaging with this sort of counter stories before.
I just wanted to ask about Plan B, because in my head, thank you. In my head, I'm just thinking I can't think about Plan B in relationship just naturally, because it's forced me to overthinking about, it's okay now, but it will end. So I should thinking, I'm not native speaker as well. So hi. I'm just thinking, is it okay? Just for me, I think it doesn't work, Plan B, because it's make another problem and much bigger problem when everything okay. I'm just thinking, we will split up.
Okay, good. So the idea here is that Plan B is to just say, well, I'm in this relationship, but it will end one day. Accept that the relationships end. So this is a legitimate worry. Once we introduce the idea that the relationship ends, do you then have to be in a relationship and always thinking that it's going to end? I think any relationship requires you to have a kind of fiction that is not going to end. But when you're watching a movie, you're not thinking, this movie is going to end. Sometimes you do, but you're just watching the movie, and you know the movie will end, but you're just going through it when you are it. So I think that's something that you can do. You don't have to be thinking, well, it is going to end, because I agree with you. That can be really grating, and that can also detract from leaving the relationship, right? But I think it's possible to do both things, to maintain the fiction that is not going to end, and to then, if it ends, accept that this is a normal part of relationships, that some end like that.
Okay, great. Do we have we've got a question at the back of the room over there.
Hi, thank you both. I've got a question for Kate. So I feel like there is this patriarchal argument in regards to monogamy, that it's natural for women who can only have a certain number of children in their limited fertile years, but that it's not natural for men because they can hypothetically impregnate countless women. As a sex historian, how do you respond to that?
That it's horseshit. It really.
Can we have some examples though? Some things from the vault, maybe.
It really gets on my nerves, and whenever I hear someone starting to wheel that one out, but when we were shut up. It really, like, you weren't there, I wasn't there, nobody was there, and we need to be really careful. And also, if you want to reduce it down to like spreading your seed, if that's where we want to take this, like that men are supposed to have lots of sex because they're supposed to scatter their seed like a fountain amongst receptive women who are just quietly grateful. But the same is true of women. All right, women can only get pregnant maybe once a year. They have different fertility cycles, everything like that. But it's actually quite difficult to get pregnant. Like, I grew up thinking you could get pregnant by sitting on the toilet seat. Remember that? When you all through school, you just thought it was so easy. But it's not. It's actually quite difficult for us to get pregnant. If you were a person with a womb and if you wanted to get pregnant, the best thing you could do would be to have as much sex as you possibly could with as many people as you could and you only have to look like men, they have an orgasm and that's it. They're sleeping. Women can keep going. Who's the one that needs to have more sex? Thank you very much. So it's just, we've just framed it badly, because if we're trying to reduce it down to like just making babies, the argument swings both ways. So just I think be very, very careful with that argument. And if anybody tries to wheel it out to you, just tell them where to go.
Is there like an example from history, I guess?
Is there
an example from history where they viewed it differently? Like this biological paradigm in a different way?
There are a few matriarchal societies around the world. There are a handful of them. I think there's one group of people that are in Borneo. I can't remember the names from the top of my head. But when they say matriarchal, they don't mean that like women are in charge. They just mean that they don't have that power structure. And the one thing that they all have in common is they do not have patrilineal inheritance rights. So names don't go down the male line. Money doesn't go down the male line. Children don't go. So when a baby is born, it's of no importance who the daddy is, because it's the mother who's important. So you don't even get this sort of like family, oh, there's two of us, now there's a baby and we're a family. Everybody's raising the babies. Then they're very few and far between, but they do exist. They do exist. And there have been many women throughout history who are absolute top shaggers. So just look to them. My favorite historical fact is that Napoleon's sister, who's called Pauline, had so much sex she was diagnosed with an exhausted vagina. So you can take that away with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're learning a lot. We've got some people down here that want to ask questions, and then we might come back.
And it seems like really obvious to me that a way that we could save ourselves potentially a lot of heartbreak would be to, in the dating process, if dating is kind of like screening, for both parties to kind of say, well, I'm a serial monogamist, or like I have this master narrative and I would either like to see where it goes for a period of time and then would be happy to walk away, or I'm in it for the long haul, like I want this to last forever. And I guess there's scope that, for that to change throughout, and we couldn't necessarily assign blame to the person for doing that. But it seems like we could save ourselves like a lot of heartbreak, and that would be a really like plausible solution.
I was hoping someone would ask this. Because like I would like to hear from you. Like like I was saying, like, okay, so I work on breakups, but my case study is monogamous breakups, right? So I want to hear from you on polyamorous. Sorry, that was polyamorous breakups. Erase that from the podcast. Polyamorous breakups. And how to prepare for it? Yeah, you should be upfront, right?
There's this kind of idea that like a lot of people think that having an open relationship or a polyamorous relationship is going to be great and it's going to be amazing. And it can be all of those things. But imagine how difficult one relationship is. A proper ethical polyamorous relationship is that, but like times 2, times 3, times 4. It's very, very difficult. And breakups, the only way that you can do it is if you kind of do what you're saying here, and it's something that's often referred to as radical honesty within polyamorous circles, and it's incredibly difficult to do it. It's one of the big conundrums of the human experience. Like, why can't we just, wouldn't it be a weird world for a bit if we all said exactly what we wanted and what we were thinking at all times? But wouldn't that be better if we could just like be brutally honest with one another about what we wanted and what we expected and what we... I don't know why humans aren't good at that, but I know a lot of people that work on it, that try and do that, but it's not easy. I've never mastered it. I lie all the time. I'm awful at it.
I believe in lying.
Yeah, I think lying's really healthy in a relationship.
Me too. Like, you need to lie as well, but like this is a specific. Yeah, we can talk about our thoughts of honesty. I think like we have similar ideas. So. But I think it's important. This is one of the things that you should be honest from the beginning, and it's one of the things that is very difficult to be honest when you meet someone. Because you're trying to date someone, and the default, the master narrative, is that you're trying to meet one person and be with one person and nobody else. So you are already saying, oh, look, I am weird, and you're going to have to deal with that. So you don't put that on the table when you are dating. But I agree with you, right? And a lot of people are actually polyamorous and should just tell other people, or maybe not.
Can I ask you, Pilar, about the master narrative idea? Because in your talk, you seem to be saying, well, we have these personal narratives and we have these social master narratives. And the questioner wants us to kind of be clear about which of these master narratives we're subscribing to. But I guess a critic might say, look, don't we have to do some work to challenge those narratives, right? Some of those narratives are actually unrealistic, or they're too burdensome, or they privilege men over women, or things like that. So in your view, and you're thinking about this, is there room for that kind of criticism, sort of social criticism of the master narratives as well? Or is it just, we've just got to be open about what we sign up to and that's fine, and there's a clarity there?
It's a complex question, right? Because like you could say yes, we should be critical, but I would be very wary. And listen, this is like related to all I have said. We cannot make our relationships, our friendships, our romantic partnerships like a scenario to perform social justice, in my opinion. There are people who disagree with me. There are like philosophers and like social scientists. One of them, for example, bell hooks. They disagree. They think that personal relationships is a place to fight for social justice. So you could take that position. If you're asking me, my personal position is that you shouldn't have an expectation of us having to fight for social justice in our relationship, but it is good if you think that you want to do it. If that's like what feels true to you, sorry to use like kind of like reality, like if it's your truth. No, if that's what it feels like, it corresponds to your identity, then you should do it. I don't think there is nothing wrong with doing it, but requesting it, I think we would be going too far. But I suppose when you are an activist trying to fight to change these things, maybe you have a different opinion.
No, it's difficult, isn't it? Because like we are all constrained by what you call like the dominant narratives, and other people call them social scripts, and we kind of, nobody sits us down and says, right, you're going to grow up, you're going to find someone, you're going to have this, sign a piece of paper, and now you're married, and then you might have kids. But it's fed to us all the time, and there's very little alternative around it. I mean, we're in a really interesting point right now where record levels of people are not having kids, where people aren't getting married, so something's shifted. So, and it might be that everyone just go, we can't afford them, Kate. So it might be that. But we are in a really interesting point. Somebody actually suggested to me, and I put it open to you guys, maybe not, is that we're that maybe this is happening because we're now in a point in our history for the first time where women can actually support themselves financially, which is an interesting point, because you don't have to go back that far. When women were financially dependent on men, that was just the system. That was what happened. When my mum had her first credit card, she had to have her husband or her father co-sign for it. She couldn't open her own bank account. And then you go back a generation before that, my grandmother couldn't have her own bank account. Then you go back before that and they couldn't. So we're now in a really interesting time that we are able to challenge the narratives in a way that we haven't before. But then I also think maybe you're just really happy with that narrative, and so you should just be allowed to crack on. But I think that we are doing a lot of work to challenge it. There are more and more alternatives. It's not as, I mean, even in the 90s, it was like worthy of a film if a woman was single in her 30s. Like, that was like, oh my God, let's make a film about this horrendous state of affairs. And now that wouldn't happen again, would it? I don't know. Well, So that was quite rambly, but yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, we had a couple of questions down at the front, so should we go to one of these? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, hi. I have a question for both. So the first one to Dr. Kate. So this idea of monogamy, sometimes I feel like people almost want to have monogamy because they want a form of prison, so they can have the option to cheat. Like almost the cheating is a form of freedom. So like they obviously they want to suffer that. Like it's not enough they want to have free love. If I tell, why not have free love? But it's good to have that prison so you can. It's a delusion of freedom, but it's actually real. And the other question, I already forgot. What was it? So yeah.
I mean, we can go with that one to start, and then come back.
Because this, I didn't actually. Yeah, it was just a clarification question. I didn't understand the idea you were saying about having options. You want to before even the breakup happens. So if I think like this. So if it ends, so I have these other options, right? That's what you were trying to say. But sometimes I feel like if I think like that, I'm already destroying the love in me. Oh, it's possible it will break up, so I have to think of these other possibilities. Like one of my friends, Ali, always have an option for yourself. Do talk to other girls at the same time. Just don't give it. But this is already destroying the love. So, and this creates almost a tension to the person, almost this freedom to give yourself to love, also another freedom to not to give yourself to love. And this creates a certain unhappiness that is kind of enjoyable. Like, like, so this is what I wasn't, what I'm trying to say? I'm not, so.
Maybe your friend is polyamorous, though.
Oh, yeah, he was polyamorous, but only for himself. He didn't allow him.
That's not polyamorous. It's just cheating. Wow. Okay. That I'd never thought about that before, but that idea that people become attached to somebody in a monogamous relationship knowing that they will cheat, that they find something else outside the relationship, that has been explored by lots of different things. I mean, Freud had a lot to say about a lot of stuff, but one of the things that he did say was that he noticed that that real romantic love was perhaps incompatible with sexual attraction and lust. I'm paraphrasing. There'll be Freudians in the audience going, "Shut up, Kate." What he observed was that when you first meet somebody that you're attracted to, and you get in that bit where it's like you're lying in bed together all day and you're ripping the knickers off each other, and that's just you and that can't last. And that's called limerence, that phase of the super attraction. And that there's been research that literally when you think about that crush, that person, your brain hits you with a riot of chemicals. Like you are literally addicted to that person in that stage. We've all been there, the butterflies when they text you and just that bit. And then eventually that has to give way to something else. And then suddenly when you're in a long-term relationship, it's very difficult to hold on to that real hot and horny, and then before you know it, you're in bed with someone with a face mask on and you've got your hair in rollers and you're talking about sorting the recycling out, and then where's the sexy bit gone? And Freud had a lot to say about that, but there's also a lot of relationship theorists who look at that and say when people cheat, it's not about the partner, it's about themselves. It's about they were trying to capture. It's not that they don't love them. It's not true that people in love don't cheat. People they cheat. You can love your partner very much, but they're looking for something else. And there's been a lot of suggestion that it is that sexual frisson. I mean, I'm endlessly fascinated by it. What people risk to get that kick, that thrill again, But you probably have far more to say about that than I do. So.
Well, in this one, I'm going to disagree with you for the first time, Kate. On the notion of limerence, right? That's something also I write on. And there is this tendency to mistake limerence with infatuation, where infatuation is this kind of like clinging to this kind of like rush. But limerence can be like really calm, really, and it can just be like really feeling really happy that the other person is on your life. And the person who coined the term, Dorothy Tenop, actually said that there are people who are limerence for all their lives.
Wow.
But the problem is, I love this reaction. This is great. Why are you not doing this? Right? So the problem is that we expect that right? And that we think like, if this is not happening to me, then my relationship is not good enough. And that is what is the problem, because some people are just like, some relationships are not long like limerence. Some people are not long like limerence. Their emotional kind of like expression is quite low. We are in England, after all, right? So it's not that there is a lot of people, especially guys, who are like, like slag guy, right? So like, but that doesn't mean that they are not really in love. But their emotion expression is not like, like butterflies or anything like that, but they are super in love. So there are different levels of limerence that people have. And the problem is to make that part of the master narrative where you think that's a requirement, I would say. But I do think that these people who cheat, they are going from a different master narrative, which is like bad boy narrative. There are many narratives out there that you can pick. No bad boy. Okay, adversity narrative. What about that? I cannot help myself because life is tragic. I wish I could love you. But, like...
Extreme cases, I'm talking about, like, even people who are genuinely monogamous, it suddenly becomes a prison. And when you cheat, it is horrible. The feeling, that horrible feeling, I'm saying, is actually enjoyable a little. So, if you tell them, go back to that, they don't want, you want the love back again, they wouldn't want it, is my point. So they want exactly this. There is actually a certain, just having free love is not enough. You have to put restriction in order to enjoy the secret. You haven't, this is a reasonable, nice guy or nice girl, but I have the bad boy or the bad girl. Like, they feed on each other the idea. So that's why I think people continuously will be always monogamous, exactly because they want, it's bizarre to say, they want to cheat. Like, so cheating becomes almost like normal, which is bizarre, but and this, again, is a contradiction, which I always talk about, this contradiction. So, yeah.
Well, you just hit me with a counterexample that I need to think about more. Yeah, because like they are like a different like kind of like aspects to your questions that I don't know how to answer about these people. I would have to think about it a bit more, but I will.
Okay, let's take another question. So I think you had your hand up for a long time, so we'll just go to you, and then I'm trying to keep track of other people.
Kate, you talked a bit about polyamorous relationships, and how does that, I guess, interact with the idea that, like, humans are socially monogamous, and what are the challenges of polyamory with this whole social monogamy?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that one. The rise of polyamory in recent years within, I suppose we'd call it like more mainstream culture, it's always been with us. In fact, many people would argue that it's even older than monogamy, but you've got to be careful with this stuff. But the interest in it has I think it's a statistic done by the hookup app Field that interest in their category of polyamorous hookups has increased 400% since lockdown. So, something's shifting. But I think that polyamory is you still pair bond with somebody, which is what the evolutionary biologists are really interested in looking at, is when we form relationships with people. And it's not that polyamorous people are outliers to this at all. In fact, in many ways, they're monogamous people, but they're the most honest about it, because they're vocalizing what they want, because social monogamy isn't genetic monogamy, which is where you are exclusive. You might, and it has all different shapes with it as well. You might have a primary partner. You might have two relationship anarchy, where you view everybody as the same intrinsic worth to your life. There's no hierarchy in it, but the key to all of it is pair bonding. And just because you're in a polyamorous relationship doesn't mean that you don't break up. A lot of people think that it's like the solution, that like, this is, we fixed everything in monogamy, but by seeing other people, you haven't. You're doing the same thing, but like 6 times over now. But I'm not sure that answered it very well, but.
Sorry, could I just add something to that? Has like in other animals that are socially monogamous, has sort of, I guess, something akin to human polyamory been observed where you've got pair bonding between like one animal pair bonding with multiple pairs, I guess.
Yeah, you do see that quite a lot. What you tend to see is there's a dominant male in a group. Gorillas do it, and then they pair bond with their little harem of women, but they're not very stable in it because they can be ousted. Another guy, presumably with larger testicles, will come along. And they'll have a fight. But that happens quite a lot. I'm trying to think if there's an example, and there'll be somebody in the room who can probably tell me if there's an example of where female animals have multiple anglerfish. Go with me. Anglerfish, the males actually attach themselves to her body, and then they slowly dissolve until there's just a pair of testicles left pumping semen in. And anglerfish have been found with multiple sets of these disembodied testicles hanging off them. Does that help? No, probably. That's not a good model to use, is it? But yeah, if we're looking to the animal kingdom, there is infinitely varied and strange patterns. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that, Pilar?
No, I'm going to leave it with the...
Okay, great. So there was a woman in the red top over there, or orange top, who's been having the hand up for a very long time. It's not you, don't worry.
Hi. I feel like there's a lot of discourse around like what a healthy relationship is and having a healthy relationship. So what do you think we mean by a healthy relationship, and do we have like a moral duty to try and be as healthy as possible within our relationships?
Very good question. I don't think you have a moral duty. I think if you want to be live your life as a life of adversity and a life of tragedy. Kierkegaard did this. I really dislike him for that, but he has a lot of fans. So this is something that you could do if you want, right? So I don't want to put a moral duty there to have the healthiest relationship. Because that's something, I knew I had forgotten something. That's something that I didn't mention, which is the whole notion of toxic positivity and how it invades. I knew I hadn't mentioned that. So the notion of you need to get over stuff, and you need to be as healthy as possible, and you need to self-improve. And that's this notion of hustle with your emotional life is something that I am really against. And the notion of healthy relationship also seems to be really tied to that. I think, however, we can separate it, right, in negative terms. Instead of giving you, okay, this is the ABC for a healthy relationship, this is what a relationship should have, I can tell you this is what a relationship should not do. A, it shouldn't obliterate your identity unless you choose it for good reason. But that's unless you choose it for good reason, it's going to have to be very good reasons, right? Second, it should not obliterate your ability for narrative thinking. And this means thinking about the future and the past, not tied completely to that person, right? That kind of obsessive stuff. And also being able to think about yourself, and this is related to the subsuming your identity, in ways that are also not only through the relationship. So if that goes too extreme, those things, that makes an unhealthy relationship, I think. But what that means will be completely different for one person than it would be for another, because we have different personalities, and sometimes it's good to give up a lot of who you were with the person you meet, because you were maybe a little crap to start off, and then you learn something from the other person, and you become better. And we do this with friends as well. So that would be my long-winded answer, and I'm really happy that you reminded me that I had forgotten that part of my talk.
Can I just pick up on this question, because it's really interesting, Pilar, right? So you were sort of suggesting that we should try not to end up in a situation where we lose our identity and our agency is compromised. But sort of, Kate, you've been talking about pair bonds and saying they're really central, actually, that's the kind of core focus. And so the attachment theorists will come in and say, yes, pair bonding is really important, and humans do it and other animals do it too. So it looks like there's a kind of tension there, in a sense, right? That pair bonds seem to be things we fall into without being able to help ourselves. But they also seem to be the things, if certain people are right, that can undermine our agency, mess up our identity, when there's a kind of threat to the bond or someone leaves. It's a kind of catastrophic loss. It's not just disappointing when your parent leaves or your lover leaves. So are you suggesting then that we should try to avoid being attached to people?
No. No, I will answer that with a longer question. Obviously, that comes into play with this thing that I have mentioned several times, which is that people have very different ways of loving and of pair bonding. And there are some ways that, by default, some people will be giving too much of themselves to the way of like obliterating. And I used to do that. And that's what happened to me in 2013. I had nothing going on for me. I had like my whole identity, my whole personality was this relationship, right? I can do it in a better way that doesn't leave me for 3 years completely destroyed and then leads me to do a whole ass PhD about it. So I think that's the extreme, right? And then the other option is like, don't get attached, right? So between doing a PhD about it and don't get attached, there are many things in the middle that this said, right? It can lead you, if you are this kind of person that gets very attached, to be a little bit psychotic of questioning all the time. Am I giving up too much? Am I giving up too much? And that, I don't know how to tell you how to solve it. You just need to live with it. I'm sorry, we are born with crap personalities sometimes.
No, I like it. I like the tragic undertones of the talk. So let's go to the front here for another question.
Hello. I've got a question that kind of combines both of your talks about whether or not you think there is a evolutionary benefit to breakups. And by that I mean, like, are we all on like a trajectory to like become better partners, and therefore that sadness that you feel through breakups is designed to make you learn and change and become better? Or do you think the sadness and that shame is as a result of the guilt of not meeting that social expectation of monogamy? And it lasting forever? Or like, so do you think it's an evolutionary response, or do you think it's more of a learned sort of guilt response, or a secret third option if you decide to give one?
I can try. An evolutionary advantage to breaking up. I love that. I'm sure that there is. I like to think that there must be, otherwise why would we keep doing it to ourselves, right? I mean, if we're talking just evolutionary biology, then we are meeting other people, spreading your genes around. All of that is beneficial. We don't seem to be very good at it, though, do we? We seem to, like, it evokes a lot of anger and upset, and it would be lovely if we could sort of be more like what you're saying, Pilar, that we could just kind of go, thank you for your service. Oh no, that's Marie Kondo, wasn't it? That was just thank something for its service and then move on. I honestly don't know the answer to that. That's a fascinating question. I've never been asked that before. There must be an evolutionary advantage to it, otherwise we wouldn't keep doing it. I often think that, like, we've evolved, our brains have evolved to the point where it's forgotten that we're just monkeys with anxiety. You know, like, I don't know if there's breakup angst in the animal world. I don't know if there are male anglerfish devastated because their testicles are just forever pumping. But humans overthink everything, right? I honestly don't know, but I will be thinking about that for a while. Maybe, can you answer that better than me?
No, because... So I mentioned Kierkegaard is one of my nemesis. Evolutionary bio is like the other one, like not biology, but like evolutionary psychology and this notion of like thinking. But I think it's a very interesting question. So you are not my enemy, just to be clear. I think that many aspects of love are things that have not to match with evolution. A lot of aspects of love have to do a lot with evolution, but a lot of others do not. And I always give the example of poetry. Okay, give me an explanation of why poetry is evolutionary advantageous. And you probably could give me one, right? Like, I'm not saying, but it will be long-winded. It won't be in the same way of, like, you know, gene selection that is like more straightforward. And I think this sort of like the collective narratives we build around what is to have a healthy relationship and what is failure. I am happy leaving evolutionary psychology out of it, but I do get some like hate for this. So like you can push back. There are people who really want to think about love from evolutionary psychology side, and you can think of people like Helen Fisher that thinks about that and thinks that love is like an addiction. So there is an advantage because of of how it makes you happy and it makes you prosocial, and then guilt is a reaction to that. So there is certainly ways of answering that question. It's a very interesting question. I just happen to personally not be very convinced by the approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Can I just ask Pilar to take off your Evo psych hat and put your philosopher of emotion hat on? So earlier you mentioned Krista Thomason's book on sort of negative emotions. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that. So breakups elicit lots of negative emotions, and do you see there's sort of value in experiencing those emotions?
Right. So we were talking about the value for evolution, and now this question is a bit different, which is the value in general, right? Like why are negative emotions valuable, and is there any value? So when we're talking about something being of value, it could mean two things. One is that you should pursue it, and another thing is like shall you encounter it, you will get some value from it. So if there is any value of negative emotions in breakups, it will be of the second kind, just to be clear. It won't be of the kind of, you should go and break up and deal with all the drama because you're gonna learn a lot, right? So there is this notion in philosophy of transformative experience, which are things that happen to you that kind of change radically the way that you perceive the world and even your own reasons to do stuff. But some transformative experiences can be really, really bad. For example, having an accident and getting a disability out of it, or losing someone. However, you could still learn from it. So there is a difference between the epistemological benefits of suffering and also kind of like the personal benefits that you get from it in terms of well-being. So epistemologically, you can learn a lot from negative emotions. You can learn what you care about. You can learn what kind of future you want in comparison to the past that you have had. That can be a reaction to it or an improvement to it or a continuation of it. I want to look for this again. And you can learn a lot about just other human beings just by having someone who is so close to you behave to you in certain ways. So it's kind of like an anthropological study in itself, if you want to think it in these super nerd, horrible ways. So from negative emotions, you can also see, you can detect the value of stuff, and that's something that is also a very common view in the philosophy of emotion, that emotions tell you something about the world. So being sad about breaking up tells you that you were in love, or that you need a therapist. Sometimes it tells you that. It has to do nothing with love.
I've thought of an evolutionary advantage to breaking up.
Nice.
Adele. Just him, it's not evolutionary, but just I was listening to Pilar talk there, and I was thinking, what would our world and our culture and our history be like if nobody experienced loss and heartbreak? Like, what would art be like? What would music be like? What would the world, what would the Taj Mahal be like? The human experience in our history and our shared experience is framed by loss and heartbreak, as sad as that is. It would be a strange, I don't know what the world would be like if you went to a movie and then you didn't cry because they didn't get together at the end, or do you know what I mean? I think that, I don't know if it's evolutionary, but it gave us Adele, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Adele.
So, thank you, Adele.
We had other questions as well. Can you just put your hand up again if you had a question, so we can go to the front here?
Hi. Mine was more about shame. So kind of, I was saying the words like you're a slut or you're a slag if you sleep around. Why has that shame been brought to kind of the polyamorous side of relationships? Because, that was the question really.
Well, I think that those words are incredibly gendered. We start there, don't we? Like slut, slag, they are words that are attached to women's sexual expression. There are male equivalents, but they don't tend to be as shame, like player, fanny wraps. That's not particularly positive, is it? That one. But historically, those words are very gendered, and there is a lot of research and talk around why it would be female sexuality that has been sanctioned so heavily, whereas boys will be boys. And we're all doing fantastic work to dismantle that, but we're certainly living in the shadow of thousands of years of it was women's sexuality that was shamed far more than men. One of the theories around this is around, and you don't have to buy into this, but it's around patrilineal inheritance, that once we have a patriarchal system where everything is inherited down the male line, suddenly it becomes of enormous import whose baby it is in the womb. That's one of the leading theories that has been put forward of why women's sexuality has been so intensely criticised and scrutinised. But we mustn't think that men's sexuality hasn't as well. Sex and relationships and desire are fantastic mechanisms of social control. They always have been, and men are controlled in different ways. Even the idea that you're supposed to go and sow your wild oats is a lot of pressure if you don't want to sow your oats, and it's a different pressure working in a different way. But these are very, very old narratives that we are unpicking and reclaiming often. I mean, what is wrong with being a slut? What do we even mean by that? Someone who enjoys sex? Someone who enjoys sex more than I do? Is that what we mean? So I think that we're doing fantastic work dismantling that, but we're absolutely left with the heft of that judgment, definitely.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So any other hands for questions? Okay. So we'll go here and then we'll go to you afterwards. So again, the lady in the red top. I think, is it red, orange?
Hi. Talking about like philosophical stuff made me think of reality TV and Married at First Sight, and I was wondering what you thought of like programs like that push this master narrative of like, your one true love, and then they all break up in horrible ways at the end. Yeah.
I am obsessed with Love is Blind, okay? Reality TV is half of my philosophical research, so I was lying. I wasn't trying to get over like breakups. I was just like having an excuse to watch reality TV and say that is my research. So if you don't know this kind of Married at First Sight or Love is Blind kind of stuff, people just go to this just really wanting to get married. Marriage is their objective. It's not like, meeting or, falling in love, whatever, but married. Okay, that's the very important thing. Sanction it with the paperwork and with a white dress, etc. So this is, you just gave the example of the master narrative, this style, right? Like unadulterated, going into someone's brain and guiding every single one of their actions. Most of us aren't like that. But Married at First Sight, Love is Blind gives you the example, the parody example of if someone were to live their lives purely through this master narrative, not having thoughts of their own or their history or whether it's time to just like meet whatever rando they meet through a wall and marry them. Like some of these people are really young, they have not lived in their life, but they're obsessed with that. That is the perfect example of a master narrative that is corrosive. And then most of us have that to a smaller extent. Yeah, good example. Oh, yes.
Okay, great. So we had a question over here. If you just want to move the mic.
Hi, just a quick question. So is the swans mating for life, is that a myth?
Yeah. Sad, isn't it? But like it's interesting the way that humans project onto other animals, and there are some animals that are genuinely genetically monogamous, but nobody's ever seen them. Was it the Malaysian giant jumping rat on a Valentine's card? But no, swans. No, there are a few examples in birds. I don't think swans are one of them. Insects, they do incredibly mad things. Like, never mind monogamous, it's like asexual reproduction and then all kinds of interesting stuff. But no, it's literally a handful of animals that have been observed to be truly, truly monogamous. And even then, some of them let the side down once or twice. But yeah.
I was very disappointed with prairie voles.
I know, slutty little thing.
I only found out what voles were because of my research. Like, what is a vole? It's like a small rat.
Yeah.
And I thought they were, but no.
It was in a recent research paper that somebody had to put in a footnote of like, we've seen ones let the side down.
I mean, it's just interesting observing how much we want to kind of look to other animals to kind of solve our problems
really
for
want
us.
That,
Right?
don't we? Like, really want the lobsters thing to have been true. It's not.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a second part to the question.
Yeah,
Is that
go.
okay? I'm just wondering, whilst you're doing your research and a PhD, I'm just wondering whether it takes away the magic of love.
No, because like actually it made me get rid of a lot of like stupid beliefs that I had and that I thought I had. And there is another, so one of the papers I write is about when you fall out of love, you are in a state of disorientation. This is philosopher Amy Harbin calls disorientation a state where you don't know how to go on. And this makes you questions, because you don't know how to go on, you question your beliefs in everything. You kind of doubt everything. You kind of become a skeptical of what the hell is going on, right? And that, being in that situation, allowed me to go into thinking about things more analytically than I used to. And I thought thinking about things analytically was something that would take out the magic, that would make me less happy, and that would make me just like a robot. And it's the other side. By thinking about things more analytically, I have found the love of my life. So it just actually brought magic to my life to do that. So yeah, I do not think at all that it takes away the magic.
Okay, so this is a fantastic advert for philosophy. If you want to meet the love of your life, become an overthinker. I mean, you might disagree as a historian.
No, I was just going to say my PhD wasn't on love. It was on medieval women having sex. So I'm fine. But yeah.
Okay, so we've got time for 2 more questions. So are the people there were some hands up earlier. I know there was one at the front, I think, Natasha. Is that right? Did you have a question? No. Oh, you didn't? Okay. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, we'll go to you there.
So we've had a lot of debate about sort of like biology or master narratives. Does it change your perspective at all on whether the relationships that we have? I mean, I don't even necessarily have to be romantic relationships, but whether if the relationship we have is like a loving relationship, is that so much of a choice, or can we quite acceptably say that like a loving relationship we have is sort of maybe convenient or like for the best for us or for everyone around us, that kind of thing?
It's a pretty bleak view, isn't it? But that's one of the leading theories of why we pair bond, is because it's effectively sharing resources, and we are social beings, and we need to hook up with each other to sort of survive. It's a really grim read, and obviously there's much more to it. You know, we talk about philosophy and art and poetry and Adele, and that's, you know, there is more to it. Is it bleak? I don't know, but you can do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that you are quote unquote in love with in order to do that. You can pair bond with friends. Many people are here with their friends tonight, and that relationship is really important. And I'm often fascinated by how we prioritize different friend relationships. I think I'm paraphrasing now, but Bell Hooks said that some of the most important love that most women will know is from other women, from their friends. You know, so maybe it doesn't have to be as bleak as all that. And I'm never sure if it is a choice, because I've been clobbered around the head by like being, is it love or is it infatuation? I don't know. And if I could have turned it off, I could have switched a switch and just gone, I would have done it in a second. I hate that feeling, you know, that awful vulnerable way, checking your phone a million times. Like, and if I could switch it off, I would. So I'm always wondered, is it a choice? I don't know. Or is it something that, like, you know, the poets would say that it's an arrow and it hits you? I don't know. I'm never sure.
I think, so first of all, I don't think it's bleak when you are just looking at conveniences. Like, I think we all want to have, like, you know, main character energy, and our life has to have, like, you know, some kind of plot. But I think it's super fine if you just want to be boring and have an easy life, right? I just felt with this person, like, you know, like, I live in a small town. This is another person in the town. We live together. I don't think that life is meaningfulness by design, by nature, right? It could be meaningful. A lot of lives like that have lacked meaning, but it could be that you just want to be boring and playing. And I think that's completely fine, okay? But then to whether you choose or you don't choose, I think I agree that sometimes it just comes to you, like, like it just happens. However, I think that you can choose what to do with that. And also I think that it's not just some magic, weird stuff. If you think about it, as human beings, we are trying to find meaning in stuff all the time. We're trying to figure out what this is all the time, in different ways, right? In ways that are like more cognitive and in ways that are more complex. And that's why Adele writes songs, etc., etc. So I think this moment of feeling that you are really in love with someone is a moment of seeing meaning. You're suddenly seeing some meaning in front of you, and it just hits you in the face. And you cannot choose when you experience this with a poem, right? You're reading a poem, and suddenly there is meaning there. I think it's very similar, and that's okay. That's cool. You're lucky. You found some meaning, which is very expensive here. Like, that's not what you say in English, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have time for one more question. So do we have a brave questioner? We have somebody here, but you've spoken already. Is there somebody that hasn't spoken that wants to ask a question?
I guess my question is more directed to Kate, but I'm interested, I guess, to hear from Pilar as well, thinking about philosophers of the past. How, I guess, are we shifting the narrative from, especially historical documents that are written from the perspective of people that are wanting to carry these narratives through history and into society and kind of perpetuate them? I guess, what are the methods or what are the approaches to go back and look at those with a different lens or a different understanding? And how do we maybe dig into them and be kind of show why they're wrong, but then also still hold them and go, this is what was thought, but it was bullshit.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's any historian is only as good as their sources, and when you're a historian that's working with sources around emotion or sources around sex, it's particularly challenging, especially when you're writing about sex and you're talking about sex, because people often didn't leave sex diaries, and the few that we've got are like gold dust. And even then, you've got to try and interrogate it from different positions. And I suppose the only thing that you can do is you have to try and meet it where it is. You have to try and understand what this person thought of. Their value system might be radically different from your own. And you have to try and be okay with that, because if you're researching sex and relationship, you will find many, many, many things that are deeply troubling and upsetting and a real affront to your modern eyes, but you still have to try and do the work to be, but how did this person understand it? What did they do to rationalize it? So you've got to always be aware of your own bias in a way that maybe it's unique for any kind of historical. You've got to do it all in historical research, but particularly sex, because we've all got an opinion on sex. That's sort of I share a corridor with somebody who researches railway rivets in the 19th century, and they love it. They're the best person on railway rivets ever. But it's not as charged as, because everyone's got something that they want to say about sex. And often you find yourself going back to the past to try and find somebody that validates where you are right now. Like Anne Lister's diaries, when they were discovered, they were described as the Dead Sea Scrolls of lesbian history. She wrote this secret diary that turned out to be lesbian, and then people read it, and she was also a bit of an arsehole. She was also a proper right-wing beat the servants and all that stuff. So you've got to try and be a neutral observer, which is incredibly difficult, because you're ultimately telling stories and prioritizing them. So that's really all that you can do, and keep going and just try and let the history stand for itself, even if it is deeply uncomfortable, because that's where you need to go as historians often. But yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, but that's what you have to do. Do you
want to add to that, Pilar?
I'm just going to add very quick, since I know there is some historians and philosophers in the room, that I think it is fundamental that when we are working about emotions, about personal experience, I think historians and philosophers, we should really talk more. We should, we have concepts and annoying questions, and we look worse usually. But you have a lot of sources about the world and history, and I hope that we can do this in the. So that's all I wanted to say. History and philosophy, unite.
Okay. So that's a perfect way of ending. So I just want to thank everyone for the great questions. We had some really fantastic contributions from the audience today, and we'll be thinking about those for a while. I really want to thank Kate. I want to thank Pilar for your amazing talks. Can we give them a round of applause, please?